Hello, welcome to my channel, Loc'D. My name is Bree, and today we're going to talk about the ultimate guide to reading Tananarive Due. If you are Tananarive Due and you are watching this, thank you so much for your contribution to Black literature, Black horror, being that girl, standing on business, all of those things. We appreciate you for it. Also, I would like to say that I have been reading Tananarive Due books for a very long time. I think I started reading her books pretty early on in my career as a booktuber. And I say career because there's a lot of effort and time that goes into being a booktuber. Not saying that other parts of the YouTube internet is not what it should be or where it's at. It just takes a lot of work to put this together. So I am also going to show you guys that I am nervous doing this video because I feel that there are other people that can do it, or I don't know. And I know people have asked me for this because I run Blackoween, which is a readathon that I host every year. It primarily focuses on spooky stuff. Last year I added a romance category, honoring my mom, and I'm going to continue that category this year if anyone was worrying or wondering. But I know that because I have Blackoween that people think that I know all the things that goes on in like Black spooky stuff, but sometimes I feel like some tasks can be so grand that I don't know where to start. So I have to literally write them down. So I'll be looking to the left as I'm talking about my guide, my personal guide of what I would offer for you if you're like, I want to read Tananarive Due, but I don't know where to start. This is a great place to start. So without further ado, let's start with the first book. So I've read pretty much a lot of Tananarive Due. What I haven't read is her books that are in anthologies with other authors. I've only read some of those, so those will be excluded from this. In addition to books that she written with her husband, I'm excluding those as well because I haven't read them all. So I'm just focusing on books that her herself read. And there's another book called Black Rose that's kind of like, based on what I'm seeing, it is a story based on Madam C.J. Walker and pioneering African American entrepreneurship. So I won't be including that, but I'll be including the rest of them. When you're trying to read Tananarive, her books can be very heavy in the subject matter. For example, she will talk about race, she will talk about colorism, she will talk about historical things that's happened to Black Americans on Turtle Island. She will talk about all these different things, different aspects of it, and really get the reader. Not only does she pulls you into the story as the reader, she also pulls you into the history. And I love that her writing, when you're reading it, you don't think, oh, is she writing this for a white gaze? You can very tell right away who her audience is when you're reading her books. The first book I think you should start with is Ghost Summer Stories. And the reason why I think you should start with Ghost Summer Stories is because I think an anthology that an author writes is a very good way to get insight into what they're able to read. The stories in this is kind of different from each other when I'm thinking of the actual subject matter. But when I think about like the spookiness and focusing on just like different narratives that are happening about Black people, I think it's really important for you to kind of like weave through and like read her short stories. And I have the same thing to say about The Wishing Pool, which I like more than the Ghost Summer Stories, but I think the Ghost Summer Stories is what you want to start off with first. But The Wishing Pool, I felt like each story you felt yourself just really in the mind of the characters. There was a character who talked about, what it is and what it can feel like being an older sibling and having to take care of all the other siblings, but also not wanting to disobey mom and wait for mom because mom said wait for me, right? And what I love about Tananarive Due is that when you're reading her books, I feel like her and Stephen Graham Jones do a really good job of turning like mundane, like Black or indigenous stuff into horrific things and turning them into cautionary tales. So I really appreciate when they kind of switch a story upside down and give a reader a different perspective. It's kind of like when authors might do like a spin on, the game It that we all played, or hide and seek, or just different things like that. I always feel that that adds to the relatedness as the reader is reading the text. So we've talked about Ghost Summer Stories and we talked about The Wishing Pool. Now, after you've read that, I think after you've read those two books, I think that you have a good point, or you have a lot of information of who she is, Tananarive Due, and just the capacity of her stories and what she's able to tell. Because I think that if an author is giving you a book of short stories, they're like, hey, I could do this, I could do that, I could do that. With The Wishing Pool specifically, there was a story in that story that became an actual novel. And when we get to that, I'll tell you that as well. I just want to pause in the story right now, or pause in the guide right now, to tell you that this ordering that I have is specifically from less spooky to most spooky. So even if you feel like, oh, this is horror and she writes hard things and I don't know if I can get into it, I'm giving you this guide to kind of like ramp you up until you get to the more gut wrenching kind of stories, right? So The Between is a book that really focuses on time and time manipulation. And it follows the protagonist, who is a Black man who seems to have lost time, and how it's related to a person that he met, in addition to his family and his children. So that is a really good book, I think, to start with. There is some moments of spookiness, there are some moments of suspense, but it is not as suspenseful, as scary as you would think it is, from my point of view, right? This is all from my point of view. So if you're like, Brie, I can't do that either, I totally get it. But if time manipulation and family values and relating to other people is things that you are looking for, The Between will be the third book that I think that you should read when reading Tananarive Due. Now we're going to move to the fourth book. The fourth book would be Joplin's Ghost. Joplin's Ghost is pretty much what it is, a ghost story. And it's a ghost story that is in tandem with the musician and that musician's career. In addition to there also being like a haunted place in this one. So I think that if all of those things are things that you're interested in, you should definitely start with that. But I thought that Joplin's Ghost was a little bit more scarier or more suspenseful than The Between. The next one that I think would be good for you, it's an entire series. It's called the African Immortal series. This series follows the story of two protagonists, I believe. It is Jessica and Dawood, or David, I think is his name. If you're new to this channel, listen, if you want to go and watch a lot of videos or live shows where I talked about this series, go right ahead. But Jessica definitely bothered me a lot in this series. You find yourself so frustrated with the decisions that not only Jessica, but David and other family members, in addition to people around them, have made throughout the entire series. Now, when I say frustrated, I don't say that it's frustrating enough to not finish. It's kind of like when I read Sarah Janet's series, and I was so over it. I just was like, everyone's making dumb decisions all the time. And you just felt like there wasn't no real rhyme or reason, but that is not the case in the African Immortal series. You think for a second that you may not know that there is a reason to something. Even in book 3, you might be like, I don't know what happened. And then book 3, you get a revelation to something that happened in book 2 or book 1. You constantly finding yourself in love-hate relationship with the two protagonists, watching them make decisions. So this series is about this young woman who falls in love with this man named David, or Duwad. I'm sorry, I'm probably saying his name wrong, but let's just say David. And she thinks that he is her world, and she is just fall deeply in love with him. However, he has some secrets. He has some secrets that he has not shared with her. He is running away from a past that is so complicated, and complicated in a way where you are questioning if he's human. And if he is human, why is he making these mistakes or making these promises or doing these things? And if he's not human, what does that mean for Jessica? What does that mean for their children? What does that mean for their friends, what does that mean for their family? And it is spooky. It is very intense and suspenseful in a lot of places. There are a multitude of trigger warnings that I want you to be aware of. There is so many things that happens in this book that has you and the reader being like, dang, I thought that I knew everything, but clearly I don't. And when you think that it can't get worse, it will get worse. So I will say that these books, each book, are big. Tananarive is not an author that you want to get into and you're like, yeah, 200 pages, woohoo. That's not who she is. She's going to give you length. She's going to give you length. The pace is going to match the energy of the length, meaning that I didn't feel like it was slow at any time. I just felt like the pace was the kind of pace that was needed for the stories that were told, even the stories in the short stories that I talked about earlier in this video. Another book that we're going to get to, our next book, is The Good House. The Good House, to me, I thought The Good House was the scariest book that I read from Tananarive Due. The Good House, I've read it twice. The Good House follows the story of this woman, and I'm just talking about the mom in the story. Follows the story of a mom who is disconnected from her culture and her heritage. And she's disconnected because when she was young, something happened to her mom. It was very traumatic, and her grandma tried to guide her or get her to understand her culture and exactly what happened to her mom. But the book starts off with like ancestral knowledge about how her grandmother came to be and how her grandmother came to be of being in a relationship with an indigenous man. And as the story progresses, you get more insight into the little girl who's now a mom, right? And you get more insight into her relationship with her son, her relationship with her husband, and her relationship with her grandma, her relationship with the house, is why it's called The Good House, and her relationship to the land. And as you're reading this story, you keep thinking that there is some insidious spirit that is really attacking this family and attacking this family in ways that the family don't even know that they're being attacked because there's so much ancestral knowledge that has been lost. And it is so spooky, and the same trigger warnings that are present in the African Immortal series are present here. Maybe to a lesser degree, maybe not as often, because the African Immortal series has 4 books, but a lot of those trigger warnings or content warnings are present in this book. Going to our final book. This is the spookiest or scariest in my opinion, and that is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This story took me, I'm not even kidding, months to finish. I'm not even kidding. The Reformatory follows the story of this young boy, and he was accused of something in front of his sister, and his sister is trying to protect him because based on what he was accused of, he was sent to the school, the reformatory, as a punishment of what he did. And while he is at this school, he is starting to see haints. He's starting to wonder if he would ever leave. He's starting to see really the underbelly of a monster. While you're reading this book, you're not only learning about his friends, but you're also learning about his father and what his father did to be separated from him. You're learning about his mom. You're learning about people in the community who had their back. You know, these 2 kids, the brother and the sister, who's trying to really just survive. You're getting more history into just Black people and boarding schools. I think a lot of times when we talk about boarding schools in America, we talk about it, you know, from an indigenous perspective. But I've never read a story where we talked about boarding schools, a Black perspective, specifically a Black person of slave ancestry. So I thought this was done really, really well. Was it scary? Yes. Did it terrify you to know what was happening to these kids in this boarding school? Absolutely. What I really thought drove home the significance of this novel is Tananarive Due's personal connection to this and how she wrote this story to essentially honor what happened to her ancestors and their ancestors now, but like her family, her uncle. I just thought that when an author is writing from a place of family and a place of truth, it makes the story way more impactful. And not saying that The Good House was not impactful. I actually gave everything I'm talking about 5 stars except Joplin's Ghost. Maybe I did get Joplin Ghost 5 stars. You know what? I can't really remember. I say all that to say is that personal story plus that pen, authors, y'all are really out here doing it. And I salute you and I thank you for it. And I cannot write a book to save my life, but I am going to be here to read them. You know what I mean? So, with saying all of that, this is my ultimate guide to reading Tananarive Due. I hope you pick up her book yesterday. Yesterday. I hope you pick it up yesterday. Not the day after, no, yesterday. I'm also going to put links to each book that I've talked about today in the description box below. I really would love everyone to support Bookshop. Bookshop is an independent website where a bunch of independent books or booksellers go through them. And I think it's just really important what's going on in America right now in book banding, that we support our indie bookstores. So I will put a link to all of those in the description below, even some that I didn't talk about, like I said, the Black Rose, and then I may put a couple links to some few other anthologies that Tananarive has contributed to. With all that, I am very nervous, but I feel like I just flew through this video, but I was just so nervous. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.